Should we start? Maestro? You got to tell me live so then I know to actually put on my game face.
Yeah, it's live.
It's live, all right, see that? Let's do it. So we're going to begin this mimer, which is, let me just kind of give you a little context why we're doing this all of a sudden. This is actually a bar mitzvah mimer. So since probably most of the people at this table did not say the mimer for their bar mitzvah, we're going to catch up now. It's never too late. It's our motto over here. And why are we learning the bar mitzvah mimer? The reason is because the Frierdiker Rebbe, who we're celebrating in these days his liberation on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz that we explained, that whole mimer we learned just now, where he was on the back of the train. Right? I told you his incarceration, like a very paralyzing, literally incarceration, began on the 15th of Sivan in 1927, and he was in prison until Gimel Tammuz. And at such time, he went to be exiled in a place called Kostroma, and just 9-10 days later, on the 12th of Tammuz, he was informed that he would be completely freed on the third. But for technical reasons, it was like a Russian holiday of some sort. All the offices were closed, so he didn't actually get out. And the 13th of Tammuz, he was freed. And so the 12th and the 13th of Tammuz, we perpetually celebrate as called the Chag HaGeula, so much that it turned the entire month of Tammuz into a month which we call Chodesh HaGeula, and it completely reorients our appreciation of this time that we're in. But what's significant as far as this mimer is that the 12th of Tammuz, which was the day that he was released, or intended to be released, is also his birthday, which is kind of an amazing hashkacha pratis, to say the least. So he was like this day that we celebrate in perpetuity was also his birthday on the 12th of Tammuz. And therefore, it's shaykh to study the bar mitzvah mimer, right? The Rebbe put out in this mimer and had to be printed in a kuntras which came out in Yud Tes Tammuz, which interestingly is not his bar mitzvah, but it's what's called, we're going to soon see, like the 7 days of mishta of a bar mitzvah. You don't usually hear such a thing. Bar mitzvah is kind of a one-shot deal. You celebrate it. But in the house of the Rebbeim, and I'm sure we could carry this into our own houses, I still have a couple bar mitzvahs coming up. I'm going to try and remember this. The chasana, the bar mitzvah is called the chasana, right? He brings it from the Zohar over here. And therefore, there's an Indian of celebrating the bar mitzvah for all 7 days. And this was essentially, as we're going to see inside in a second, the final mimer that was said at the Frierdiker Rebbe's bar mitzvah by his father, the Rebbe Rashab. And so it's basically, obviously, if it's a Chassidus that comes out at this time, it's all relevant to the themes of this time of year, etc. So this is the background of why we chose this mimer. It was said in Parshas Pinchas, which is coming up in a couple weeks. All right, with no further ado, let's get into it. V'chazakta v'yisa le'ish. Ruby, would you mind turning on the air for behind us?
The air is on.
What's that?
The air is now on.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I can breathe.
Yeah, it feels good. All right, so this is a pasuk from Malachim, and it says, strengthen yourself and be a man. Right? That's what we call the mimer, be a man. Strengthen yourself and be a man. Hine Yedua. It is known, Shamayim Rasha'amar Admirad Rashab. The mimer that was said by the Rebbe Rashab, Bayom Hashvi the Chagigas Bar Mitzvah Shel Beno Hayechido. As I mentioned just a second ago, on the 7th day of the bar mitzvah party, right, of his only son, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was Yud Tammuz, Yud Tes Tammuz, thank you, Taf Reish Nun Gimel, right? In the year Yud Tes, Taf Reish Nun Gimel. If you do the math, Yud Tes Tammuz is actually not really the 7th day, but he explains that that year, the 17th of Tammuz, the fast was pushed off. He explains in the footnote, so they added like an extra day essentially. But Maimer Zeh, who Siyum v'chosim hahemshech tefillin the Mari Alma, right? So this mimer is actually a continuation. It wound up actually, it was actually on his bris. So instead of 7 days from from the bar mitzvah, from the his birth. It wound up being this is the mimer that aligned with the day of his bris. But this is a mimer which is kind of the continuation and the conclusion of the mimer that was said on his actual bar mitzvah, which is called Tefillin de Marialma. She's Chil Lomer b'Yud Beis Tammuz, that the Rebbe Rashab started saying on his actual bar mitzvah day, right? The Yom of Bar Mitzvah. And the beginning of this mimer starts with these words: V'chazak tavayisa le'ish. Hashayich is the pasuk zeh. The connection of this verse, V'chazak tavayisa le'ish, lebar mitzvah b'pashtus. So what's the connection simply of such a thing? You shall be strong and be a man to a bar mitzvah. Al pi hayidua is known dezeh sheben 13 dafka mechoyav b'mitzvahs. Why is it that a 13-year-old boy specifically is obligated in mitzvahs? Ki az dafka nikra b'shem ish. It's because then is when he gains a new title on his person, which is called ish. Right? You become a man. And therefore, it's obvious that to say a maimer, v'chazak teba'isa le'ish, is shaykh to a bar mitzvah boy who just became a man. But, tzrich lahavi, we have to understand, the mekevan sheben yud gimel shana naisa ish al pi teva, since just by turning 13, you naturally become a man, just because of your age. My hadgasha lomer b'chagigas bar mitzvah v'chazak tevayis le'ish. Why do you have to tell the bar mitzvah boy, you shall be strengthened and become a man? In other words, even if you didn't tell him you shall be strengthened and become a man, he became a man already all by himself just by turning 13 years old. So in other words, we don't actually understand so simply why these words are shaykh to a bar mitzvah. Seemingly these would be redundant words on a bar mitzvah. You're telling him, you're giving him like an extra koach to become an ish, when really he's already an ish by his birthright. V'gam tzrich lahav, and we also have to understand, Hari Amayla de ben Yud Gimel Shana, Hisha'az Naisa Bar Das. Why does he suddenly become an ish when he's 13 years old? What happens to him, sort of in his physique, is that he becomes what's called a Bar Das. What's a Bar Das? His brain gets developed to a certain point, right? There's a couple different shitas and dayas as to why a person at 13 suddenly has all the mitzvahs thrown upon them. It's a kind of a sudden thing. Right, that when you were 12 years old and 364 days, you had no obligations. Suddenly, boom, you have all the obligations placed upon you instantaneously. What happens to you to have such a schus that suddenly you're responsible for everything? So there's a couple different answers. One is that it's a gezeras hakasav. Basically, just God says, He draws a line in the sand, and this is your time. But according to this opinion, right? It's because something happens to you physiologically, and your brain gets developed at that time, and therefore you become like rational enough to accept this upon yourself. Whether we hold one or two of these opinions actually has a nafkamina for a non-Jew, because they also have mitzvahs, right? They have the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. When do they get their mitzvahs? When are they obligated in their mitzvahs? So it depends. According to the opinion that it's for us, right? It's a gezeras hakasav at 13 that you just get it. The question is, does that gezeras hakasav apply to them too, or is that only for Jews who have the special 613 mitzvahs, right? In which case we could say maybe they get it at 13, but if it's only according to brain development, it could be that they are obligated in their mitzvahs at varying times based on when they mature. It's actually a question that's sort of left open for discussion. The point is right now we're going according to an opinion that the development of the mind, right? Perhaps they come together as one, is what makes you suddenly a bar mitzvah. And therefore at 13 years old, you become what's called a bar das, which means someone of sound mind. And das, hu b'mochin. What is das? It has to do with your brain development. Ubifrat lefi mavur ba'maimer, divra maschil isab midrash telim, taf reish nun gimel. Particularly, there's another mimer about the bar mitzvah, which is entitled Isa b'midrash Tehillim. It's brought in the midrash of Tehillim, which happens to be, he says in the brackets, one of the maimarim that the Friedrich Rebbe actually said over at his bar mitzvah, and actually that's the custom to this day, that all bar mitzvah boys say that mimer that the Friedrich Rebbe said by heart, which is a mimer called Isa b'midrash Tehillim. But in that mimer it explains, Shamayla de ben Yud Gimel Shana, hu sha'az yesh etzim hamochi, is that you basically come to a state of perfection of the brain, right? Your intellectual capacities surge to an essential completion. And therefore, we left with our second question, which is, if becoming a bar mitzvah gets you to a certain completion of intellectual perfection, then why are we specifically calling him an ish at that time? Who can understand what the question is? You have to know a little bit of background. But there's 4 names for man. What are the 4 names that man are called? Adam, Ish, Gever, and Enush. Right? These are like, and each one of these 4 names actually correspond to one of the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right? The 4 levels of man correspond to the different levels Yud Kei Vav Kei. Good morning, welcome. Everyone say hello to Eitan, a new fellow student. So the point is that if you break down Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's also a breakdown of the quality of the human system. In other words, let's put it like this: Yud Kei Vav Kei also represents man, animal, plant, and inanimate. You're familiar with this idea? The 4 levels of Hashem's name are also the 4 levels of creation. And in that as well, there's also the 4 levels of within man, which is basically Adam represents the mind, Ish represents the emotions. And basically when it comes to Enosh and Gever, Enosh is essentially the weakened state of the Yetzer Hara, and Gever, which means to overcome, is sort of like the ability for you to overcome this Yetzer Hara. But in short, these different levels, Adam represents the mind, Ish represents the emotions. So now we're faced with this question. If we're saying that the Maila of a Yud Gimel Shana, that when you turn 13, you become full in your mind, your brain is whole, so then why would we say V'chazakta v'yisa le'ish? We should say what? V'chazakta v'yisa Adam, right? The quality of the brain is specifically goes on the word for man called Adam. And here we're pumping him up and say you should be a man, but we're using the wrong word because we're emphasizing his emotional development with the word Ish and not his intellectual development, which should be in the word Adam. You following this? All right, so basically we had 2 questions, right? We're going to get back to them only much later, as is often the theme with these Maimarim. We're going to now jump into something completely, seemingly unrelated. But let's just get the 2 questions down so when we remind you later, they'll be at least fresh in your mind. We'll have said them twice. Which is 1, why are we telling this person, strengthen yourself and become a man, when you're already become a man naturally when you turn 13 years old? 2, why do we say Chazak V'yisa La'ish when the whole quality of becoming a bar mitzvah is that you have now like a higher level brain, and the word Ish goes and refers to emotions. It's like the wrong accolade for the person at the time. Got it? You following me? Okay, we'll go one more time. Can't do enough review. What's that?
It's kind of the same question though, because if you had said strengthen yourself and become an Adam,
Yeah.
then you would have understood it. That would have been the only question, because like you could say that from 13 he becomes an Adam, and like
No, but at 13 it becomes an. So, but even then, then you'd have to say it happens naturally. Why do you have to say strengthen yourself and become?
Okay, well, like
Right. That's the first question is we're basing this on a pasuk that says is giving like a certain empowerment to a person to be a man, right? To be an ish. And what we're saying is when a person turns 13, they naturally become an ish. So why do we have to come and give him this sort of empowering statement? Be a man. He's just become a man. Like, thank you. I'll take it from here. That's question number 1. Get it? Question number 2 is there's different words for man that have to do with different qualities that they possess. The word for man called Adam represents his intellect. The word for man called Ish represents his emotional development. When a person becomes 13, we learned from a previous mimer that his intellect, he becomes obligated to mitzvahs. Why? Because his intellect became whole. So therefore, if anything, we're going to tell him to strengthen himself and become an Adam, which is the word for intellectual wholeness. The word for Ish is suddenly not really relevant to him because we're telling him, now that you have a strong intellect, strengthen yourself in your emotional domain. That's like sort of off. we should be using, it's like the wrong word. It should be Adam instead of Ish. Follow? Okay. Any more questions? Let's move on. All right, now we're going to get to sort of the thick part of the cholent here. Os base. Hine bechelek hemshech shenemar az mavur milas Yosef al Yaakov. So in that stream of Maimarim that were said by the Rabbi Rashab for his son's bar mitzvah, he continues with this notion of the quality of Yosef over Yaakov. Damshacha sha'agde Yaakov hi batzilus, and he explains that what Yaakov was able to perform and essentially elicit from God is drawing down light into Atzilus. You know what Atzilus is? Nice. Ba'agde Yosef, and through Yosef, by the way, the word Yosef means to add. Nimshach hagiloi gam bebiyah. So Yosef has an even additional quality on Yaakov, is able to draw down godliness not only into Atzilus, but further into what's called Biyah, which is Bria, Yitzir, and Asiyah, the lower three worlds. V'yesh lomar, dezeh sheba maimer divra maschem v'chazak tavayis le'ish, medav b'shivcho shel Yosef, this that he just says parenthetically here, the fact that the Rabbi Rashab was saying over in his Maimer something which highlighted the qualities of Yosef over Yaakov, right? He's busy talking to his son, basically. He's talking to all of eternity, saying a Hasidic Maimer, but he's directing it at his son's bar mitzvah. The fact that he's talking about the qualities and the praises of Yosef, which is the first name of the bar mitzvah boy, right? The Friedrich Rebbe's name is Yosef Yitzchak, who gam bichdei le'orer oso al avodah hamyuchedes de Yosef. It's because he was also empowering him and arousing in him the unique quality of Yosef, lamshich gilei ad lamatamata, which would ultimately be his son's basically contribution to Chassidus, which is to draw the light of God lower and lower into the lowest places, right? Yosef, the Rebbe, was the first person to bring Chassidus, so to speak, in what we call the Chetzi Kador HaTachton, into the lower hemisphere of the world, physically, and also sort of spiritually. He was the first one to really bring Hasidus and translate it into other languages and make it truly available to like the common, even man, woman, and child. So he knew that this was his son's tafkid in life. He was a 13-year-old, soon-to-be Rebbe. He gave him a mimer about the qualities of Yosef because this was going to be his task. It was to be the Yosef to the Yaakov that came before him. In order to explain how great Yosef is and what he adds, you have to first understand what's great about Yaakov. What's Yaakov's quality? Only once you can really perceive what Yaakov is, only then you can even understand what is Yosef's contribution. You won't pick it up unless you know what he was adding on to. Okay, so here we go. This is the meat and potatoes. He says he starts to explain on what it says in the pasuk, which we say every day in davening. It's part of our davening. So obviously, we're talking about meditating and davening. Here we're going to give you some words of davening that could take you 6 hours to daven from here on out, if you like. So it says, "Atahu Hashem levadecha, ata asisas hashamayim, gomer, etc. V'ata mechayes kulam." Right? We say, "You are He, Hashem, who is alone." Atahu Hashem levadecha. You are He, Hashem, who is alone. And then, comma, ata asisas hashamayim. You made the heavens and the earth, etc. And then it continues with a third section, va'ata mechayes kulam. You enliven them all. Shem gimel medregus. We have here 3 different levels. Atahu Hashem levadecha. The first statement is, you are He, Hashem, who is alone. Kai ala or ein sof shlifnei atzimtzum. This is referring to the or ein sof that precedes the tzimtzum, right? So we're talking about basically divine light before Hashem contracted it and made space for the worlds, before the tzimtzum. And actually in that light itself, there's already 3 different stages in the first stage, because it's all in the words of the pasuk, right? You can see how all of like Chassidus is sort of sunk into these simple words of prayer. Ata hu havaya, right? All these things that we say, you are He who is havaya, is levadecha. right, are alone. So in the realm of what's called alone, which means before he created the tzimtzum and made the space for others, and he's therefore alone, there's these three levels, ata, hu, and havaya. Ata, hu, atzmus, ma'or. What does ata refer to? It's really, there's no word for this except we call it the luminary, right? Why do we call it the Hashem the luminary? Not because he's actually made of like light substance, but because all the Or Ein Sof that we speak about, which is called illumination, we know it has a source, so we call the source the luminary, right? But this refers to mamash, the essence of God. There is no higher thing than we can discuss than what's called the ma'or, the luminary of Hashem, the essence. So this is called ata, you, right? Why do we call it you? By the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe, it says that when he would say Baruch ata, inside of the word ata, you have a tuf, and inside the tuf, it's not a suf, it's a tuf with a dot in the middle, right? So it said the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he would say brachas, ata, he would just get stuck on this ata, this little dot in the middle of the tuf, and just that was it. He was like stuck with the atzmus for the rest of the bracha. But okay, this is the ata. Why do we call Hashem's essence you? V'omer al ze ata l'shem nochach. You is second person, right? It's basically just addressing someone face to face. Ki ha'atzmus hu b'kol makom be'yizgalus. And why do we say you specifically on this when we're referencing the essence of God? And the answer he gives here is because the essence of God is always in a state of revelation. What does that mean? That's actually a very complicated conversation. If you look at the footnote, he sends you to this Torah or Maimon Vayera, which is one of the deepest Maimorim under the sun. But I'll try and kind of make it short and sweet as I can. But basically, he explains. Here let's just go off on a tangent. This is what Chassidus is all about, at least in my class, L'chaim. He explains there that, in fact, we just came across it in Shara Yuchad Ve'amunah, right? That we're reading now in the Tanya, Daily Tanya. We just came across this idea that the Alter Rebbe has kind of said some sharp words to those students of the Arizal that misunderstood the Tzimtzum, right? And he said they took the Tzimtzum that the Arizal speaks about, kepshuto, to mean simply that Hashem actually removed himself, right? And there, Hashem was filling the space, and Hashem removed himself, and then he brought back a small kav of light, and with that kav he made the worlds. And these faulty students, which is basically the Gra and his followers, he doesn't mention them by name, but this is what who was referring to, they understood that Tzimtzum kipshuto. And this is one of the major philosophical and ideological differences in Chassidus that it was bringing to the table. And basically, what does it mean to understand that Tzimtzum kipshuto? It means that God literally was removed, right? Because it says Hashem removed himself, right? And therefore, according to the faulty understanding, in that space where God is removed, this is the source of all evil. Because there's like a place where God is not, right? How did the Alter Rebbe understand it? That there, chas v'shalom, to say such a thing. He says that every Jew knows, even in a simple state of amunah, sheleis asar panoi mineh, that there is no place absent of him, right? It's not possible for Hashem to remove himself from a place. So what does the Arizal mean? Right? He said he's mitzamtzem the or, he contracts himself. So he said this refers to, he contracted the light, the infinite light of the Or Ein Sof. And he basically brought it into a state of non-being, and therefore there was a great absence. But what actually filled that absence, right, was the essence of Hashem, which cannot be seen. And therefore you can not only understand the extreme difference in ideology that this causes, therefore what is evil, right? The place where Hashem is not, is really where the place where Hashem's light is not, where Hashem's essence is. And therefore inside of all dark things, it's actually a representation of something even higher than the light. Not an absence of the light, but sort of the source of the light is where you see this darkness, which is essentially this whole new understanding of Achdus Hashem, that darkness and evil really is nothing other than the essence of Hashem. And why does it look evil? Because you can't see it, there's no light there. So it's a massive shift, but the point is that therefore, one thing which is truly everywhere, in other words, in all states of the Ishtalshlus, and it can never go away because it cannot be contracted, even in the darkest of darkest places, is the essence of Hashem. It's nothing that can ever be removed. And therefore, it's the one thing you can say, you. Because wherever you are, you, right? It's right there. It's always that which is before you, even though you can't see it. On the contrary, you can never see it, no matter how high of a light you're dealing with. But it's the thing that's always underlying everything because it's God's essence and it can't be removed. So this goes on. We call this therefore you in the pasuk, right? Yeah.
And then who goes into
Hold on, he's going to explain who in a second, right? So this is lashon nochach ki atzmus hu b'chol makom. Galus, because and it's a funny statement because it says the essence is always revealed. The truth is the essence is actually never revealed. You don't see it, but it's always in a state of it's always there. So it's basically in a state of revelation continuously, because it's the one thing that can actually never be removed, right? So it's always before you, and that's the way that we sort of sum this up in a very simple way of understanding is Shem Shamayim Shagur B'Fikol, that everyone knows about God. Doesn't matter if you're a little child, if you're there's sort of this understanding that there's a God, right? You'd have to do some serious mental gymnastics to sort of decide that there isn't, right? It's sort of a new invention, atheism. But everyone just says, the basic knowledge of God is just even germane even to a child. Fine, so that's the ending of Ata. Then you have Hu and Havaya. Atahu Havaya levadecha. So what is Hu and Havaya? Hem beis medregos behaor. These are two levels in the light. Right? So coming now, the essence now basically has light which it produces, but the light which it produces it's not like light you've ever heard of before, right? These two levels of light. One is called the etzem haor, which is called Hu, right? And why do we call it Hu? What is Hu? It's third person. Third person represents in Hebrew. How do you say third person? How do you say third person in Hebrew? There's in second person you say lashon nochach. Right. Third person you say lashon nistar, which means hidden. Why? Also in English, him represents someone that's not in the room. Basically, is not before you. You're not addressing him. He's over there somewhere. So who? By Hashem, lashon, the third person is called lashon nistar, which means the hidden tense, and it's referring to Hashem's light, but not the light as it actually shines or is even capable of shining, but the sort of the essential light that the essence contains, the ability of light to shine. So this is called the etzem haor. As we're going to soon see, as opposed to the hispashtus haor, which is the expression of light when the light actually does shine, which is then called havaya. Right? Yud Kei Vav Kei is essentially the Or Ein Sof, because Havaya, remember, is a conjugation, if you will, of the words Haya Hoveh V'Yihyeh, which means was, is, and will be, which is a state of godliness which defies time and space. Essentially, it's all being as one. But what it is at least it's in a state of so to speak, the expression of the light. So you have the essence. You have the essence of the light, which is basically the light in its essence before it shines out, and then you have the actual expansion and the expression of the light. And all these things are called levadecha, as we're soon going to see. They're all called still Hashem is alone, because there's still no existence other than His in any of these three states. And that's what we're going to say in a minute. Yeah, you have a question?
I thought Yud Kei Vav Kei was dafka the part that was before expression. That's like
before expression?
Yeah, beyond
This is before expression, by the way. This is he called hispashtus or it's not expressed to anyone yet, right?
But when we put Yud Kei Vav Kei after who is nistar, which is an idea of tzimtzum.
No, there's no tzimtzum in this place. The tzimtzum is only going to take again. The tzimtzum takes place where, right? When light has already kind of expressed itself, which is essentially what we're calling Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now you have something you can take away. You can't. This is the whole point we made before. You can't make a tzimtzum on Hashem's essence. It doesn't go anywhere, right? Tzimtzum means you're going to retract something, and that was the mistake that the Alter Rebbe points out in the Tanya. You cannot contract the essence and put it anywhere. It's in a state of perpetual being, although its being does not have any expression, right? But you can't put it out and take it away. So the only thing, so where does the tzimtzum take place? Only when there's going to be a light which is expressed. Then I can say I'm going to bring that back light into a state of non-expression. That's called a tzimtzum. So it's only relevant in the Shem after the Shem Havaya is out there.
So what aspect of who is being hidden?
It's not that it's being hidden. It's something which is essentially as of yet not showing itself. In other words, Hashem can shine, right? Or he cannot shine. The fact that he can shine, before he even shines, he has that power of being able to shine. That's not all he can do, right? It's not a one-trick pony. That's what I'm trying to say. The essence, we call it the luminary because we need something to call it. But a true luminary is a one-trick pony. Its job is to shine light. Hashem's essence, we have no idea what it really is. But one thing that we know that it does is shines light. So therefore, we call it the luminary. But before it actually shines the light, it has light to shine inside of itself. The level of the light in that state, we call it the essential light, which is light before it shines. There's no contraction involved. It just hasn't been. Now, once we shine it, then we can bring it back, and we'll call that the contraction. You follow?
That's on who. That's not ata. What you just described.
Who is the essence of the light? Ata is the essence itself, before the essence of the light.
Okay.
It's not simple stuff. We're trying to understand it. Questions are definitely welcome. Even just like, huh, is a good question. Okay, fine. So far, so good, I think. So anyway, on all these levels, Atahu Havaya, Omer Alzeh Levadecha. On all of it, we say you're alone. She'ein kan davar zulas ha'atzmus, because there's still, at this stage, there's still nothing else but God. So in other words, when we say that he's shining the light, don't take this the wrong way. It's basically, there's no space yet that's been invented for him to shine this light into. So when we're saying that he's actually shining the light, we don't mean that the light is shining towards something that's going to happen in a minute. The light only sort of shines towards something when he opens up a tzimtzum and creates a place for light to shine into. But what we're saying is that there's light which is inside of his essence, and there's light which could project itself, right? And in a certain sense, it's in a state of projecting self, but only inside of himself still and to himself.
So you're saying sort of like the light is like at the earlier stage, just sort of like distributed through everything.
At the earliest state, which earliest state are you talking
about?
Well,
I guess I was thinking like before the Tzimtzum, like we're saying there's just sort of the essence of the light, and then.
Okay, but even before the Tzimtzum, there's the essence and the expression of the light.
Yeah, so I guess that's like how's the light express? Because like, it kind of sounds like you're saying the Tzimtzum kind of creates space for light to actually, for like a projection.
Right. So when we say expression of the light, we do not mean that it's shining into space.
Yeah, it's not,
there's no space to shine into it yet. There's no opening.
Yeah.
What we call the open space, or the chala, or the makam panui, this empty space for it to shine into. It didn't get created yet. So again, what we mean is there's essentially the potential of light to shine. At first, the essence of the light is that Hashem has light inside of him in an essential way, like he has the existence of such a thing called light. The next stage is that this light can shine before it even shines.
Yeah.
Right? Its ability to express itself is already called the extension of the light before it actually expresses itself to anything. We can imagine it as basically infinite light expressing itself, but there's obviously like a slight limitation in our imagination, because that would be taking place in some place, and we're talking about before place.
This is Yud Kei Vav Kei.
This is the expansion of the light is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So all of this we're saying is called levadecha. It's all him alone. She'ein kan davar zulas ha'atzmus. There is nothing other than him at this point. Ki klalos ha'or shlifnei ha'tzimtzum, all the light which precedes the tzimtzum, gam ha'or ha'shayach la'olamos, right? This is an important point. Even the light which is relevant to worlds, which is basically a light which could shine, right? Which ultimately, when the tzimtzum happens and we experience light shining at us, the light that we're going to experience shining at us is the light which is hispashtus, the expansion of the light. So it's relevant to worlds, but at this state when it's levadecha alone, it's still no one else there. It's before the tzimtzum. Hu klul ba'atzmuso ve'einu b'chinas metzias. It's still inside of his essence, and it's not in a state of existence. He says in footnote 15, just like a little addition to that, that it's generally called all of these lights are called an ability, right? So you could look at this, there's an ability for there to be light, and then there's another ability for that light to shine. But none of those things have actually happened yet. They're all theoretical potentials. So let me explain it maybe in like a visual, right? You could have this notion of, I like to explain the light as like an ocean, right? And inside of the ocean, there's like a point, a singular point that's designated inside of the ocean, which is going to be a finite point of light, which could theoretically shine to the worlds, right? The infinite light of the ocean is incapable of ever being experienced by the worlds because it's beyond capacity of any finite being. But if you point out a little drop of water in this ocean, that's what we're calling Havaya, right? Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is essentially the light which is relevant for the worlds, right? And that's why it has a name, right? Even though it's Haya, Hobeh, V'Yihye, which means past, present, and future as one, it still connotes and denotes this notion of past, present, and future. It's like it's talking about past, present, and future at least, even though it's in a state which is before it can be handled by the past, present, or the future. At least it's discussing the concept of the world. So you have the infinite ocean of light is called the essence of the light. You have the drop of water, which is called the Havaya. It's the light which is relevant to being expressed. But imagine now all that, and this whole ocean of light with the drop inside is inside of Hashem, right? It didn't come out yet. So therefore, the ocean and the expression are all potential because nothing went anywhere yet. It's still inside of Hashem's essence. So the ocean and the drop of the ocean inside, they're inside of the ma'or, they're inside of the essence of Hashem, and they didn't come out yet. That's what means Hashem is alone.
It's kind of like the claw and prop thing too. I mean, maybe I'm just getting confused because we're doing the same ocean analogy, but sort of there's like the whole light that's sort of distributed in the ocean, and then that's sort of like the detail of the general light, which is that one point that has that kind of like projectability, even if it's not projecting it. I don't know. I'm probably mixing metaphors.
I'm confused by that. Let's move on. So I hear you though. You can do that. Just tinker with that a little bit. Okay, fine. So so this is very, very deep. You can thank Ruvi for this. But is anyone completely lost? Or you're sort of following along in your basic state. Yeah, you have a question?
Can I poorly summarize it so you can fix it?
I would love it.
So, Ata is the essence of the light. Then
No.
Essence.
The essence period.
Sorry, Ata is the essence. Who is the etzem?
Is the essence of the light. Essence of the light.
Ata is
This
the
is helpful.
essence.
Ata is the essence of God, which precedes the concept of light.
Ata is the essence. Who is the essence of the light?
Yes.
Ata is the essence. Who is the essence of the light? Then
Havaya.
Yeah,
Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Which is the what's Havaya?
It's the expression of the light.
Potential.
The potential, the theoretical expression.
Well, first of all, let's just call it the expression of the light, right? So you have the essence of the light, and then the expression of the light, right? Hispashtu sa'or. But what we're saying is, since all of that is called livadecha, Ato Hashem, right? It says Atahu Hashem livadecha. So after we understand that there's the essence, and there's the essence of the light, and then that there's the expansion of the light, we have to then go back and say, wait a second, all of this is taking place alone, right? Livadecha, which means it's all in potential. There's no expansion of the light to anywhere, right? It's just that, like I said, in theory, there's an ability now to express light. And what's the difference? Because when there was only the essence of the light, that light was not good for anybody, even if it was, like, so to speak, it would come out or something. It's not relevant to the world. Because it's a level of light which is beyond expression. It can't be expressed. It's like God's private light inside of his essence. It's nothing to do with us. So within a drop of that private light, of God's essential light inside of his essence, he picked out a little piece which he can shine to us. That's called Havaya, right? But before he actually shines it to us, it's just his ability to shine it to us inside. So all of this is taking place inside of his essence. Inside of his essence, without anything coming out, is the essence of the light and the expansion of the light, without any moving or shaking anybody, anything.
So Levada is still the potential to project.
It's the potential to project. Yes, it's the potential to project, right? Because it's still levadecha, it's still alone. Omer, you with me?
Yes. On the level of.
Was that good? You understanding?
On the level of Ata, would we agree that sort of like is what we were saying yesterday in Holy Gvurot? Like the Holy Gvurot, we were saying, that's basically Ata.
That could be who?
That could be who?
Yeah, because it's still like connected with the. It's also a negation, right? So right. It's also a negation. It's basically like the sovev, the unseen, the unprojected.
I'm having trouble understanding the difference between like, I don't know, essence and essence of the light. I don't know.
Okay, because look, the
analogy or something.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Hashem can project light, right? But He Himself is not light. He contains inside of Him the ability to have light. At that level, where there's like the notion of light inside of Hashem, it didn't shine yet, and it's not even capable of shining. But it's not Him. It's still something that He's carrying with Him. Right? Because Him Himself has really no attributes. We can't describe it at all. We're calling it the ma'or, the luminary, because it does produce light. It might produce other things as well. But the idea is that there's a difference between the luminary and the illumination. Right? Think about the sun. There's like the ball of the sun, and there's the light that comes out of the sun. Not only are they not the same thing, they're incomparable. Whatever's producing that light is something on a completely different scale entirely, to the point that it's incomparable to this little tiny thing called light that comes out of him. Now the light that comes out of him, just like all light is a reflection of the thing that's shining it. And therefore, since the thing that's shining it is God, it's the Or Ein Sof, and it's an infinite light that has no beginning or end, right? But still, that light is only a revelation and trying to reveal the thing that it's shining from. So the light and the luminary are two different things. But what we're saying is that even the sunlight, we could say that imagine if there's an aspect of sunlight which basically, even though it projects off the ball of the sun, it still stays inside the sun. In other words, the ball of the sun can produce light that never comes out, right? And then there's another thing, which is actually light that shines outside of the sun. That's called already the hispashtus of the light. So the essence of the light and the hispashtus of the light, they're kind of categorized together because both of them are equally incomparable to the essence itself, which produces light.
Could you say that like the essence is like, there's like the sun, and then there's like that flaming ball that you can see in the sky.
Right.
That's like the expression of the sun.
Okay.
There's like actual
The
sunlight.
sunlight, exactly. That's a good way of understanding it.
So the sun itself would be.
But you can't see, right?
Ata. The sun itself is Ata. And
Right.
The
Right. Right.
The sun itself is Ata.
Right.
The
ball that
flaming
you see.
ball that you
Yeah.
see is like Hu.
Yes.
And then the sunlight is Yudke Vavke.
Yes. Now, exactly. But now, take it one step further. All of the ball, the flaming ball, and the sunlight, it's before it comes out.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying.
That's
That's
all
what
like,
levadecha.
That's all like theoretical, like potential energy. I think,
Yes.
is the
In other words, it could come out and be a flaming ball, and it could come out further and be sunlight. But all that was going to require something called the tzimtzum to happen first, right? So in the meantime, it's all
sunglasses to see it.
Yeah, it's all inside of the sun.
It's
The,
basically exactly
the essence of the
exactly what
light
you
and the
thought.
expression of the light have not yet. Neither of them have yet gone anywhere.
It's basically exactly what you thought before you said it.
Yeah.
It's all a thought.
It's exactly right.
That's theoretical.
So be a man. All right. So yes, that was helpful.
And the summary of the whole thing.
Okay, let's keep going. We're moving on to the next step of this verse. We did that first part. Ata hu Hashem levadecha, finished. Now, what's the next part of the verse? Ata asisa es hashamayim. You made the heavens. What is going on here? Hu ha'or k'moshe nasim makar lisavos ha'olamos. This is the light as it's now become the source of the existence of the worlds. Right? Which means we're going to basically take this drop that we spoke about, the spashtus of the or, which is now going to be a tzimtzum is going to take place, right? And we're going to get our hands on an expression of God's light, but what part can we even is relevant to be expressed to us? Only that drop, only the rays of the sun, right? And this is going to be called Ata asisas hashamayim. You made the heavens, because all of a sudden we're bringing in the other into the picture, which is called the heavens. And this is a light which is going to be the source of the existence of creation. All of creation, from the highest worlds to the lowest worlds, is predicated on there being divine light underlying it. This divine light is what we're talking about, you made the heavens, which is a light which comes after the tzimtzum, is now responsible for enlivening other things. V'lachein kasiv ata asisa, ata chasar hey. If you look in the actual pasuk in Tanakh, where it says, you made the heavens, you're going to see that the word ata is written without a hey. Unusual. It says at, but you read it ata. Why is the hey missing? What's it coming to teach you? What the hey?
Does it come out under the tav?
Under the tav? Yeah. But it's without a, without a hey, exactly. Kia or,
It's not the pure essence.
well, let's find out. It's a very cool thing. Gama or shaykh la'olmos havaya, right? So why is it missing this hey? Because the light, Gama or shaykh la'olmos havaya, even this little minimized light, which is called the havaya from the previous conversation, kamosh lifnei tzimtzum, as it is before the tzimtzum, einu be'erech lios makar la'olmos. At that state, we said it's only the potential of Hashem to shine into the worlds, if you recall. But at that state where it's holding, it's in no state to actually be the source of the worlds. It has to go through some kind of cataclysmic tzimtzum for even the drop, or what we called before the ray, to actually change its state, to actually become the source of the worlds, to actually enliven the world. Because in its potential state, if it would attempt to enliven the world from that potential state where as it is before the tzimtzum, it would still, because it's still one with the essence, it would annihilate any other potential other in its source, in its course, right? So in other words, if you have this, the fiery ball of the sun, and even the ray of light that comes from the sun, but all that is still in a state of levadecha, it's still inside, even though the ray of light was designed to enliven the worlds, if you would take it as it is inside the sun and try and enliven the worlds with that, no way. It's still holding at its essential state, and therefore it's not yet ready to actually be the light which enlivens the world. It has to go through this process of coming out after a tzimtzum. Now you have the same drop of light, you have that same ray, but it's separated itself from the essence. It's now contracted itself to be able to enliven the worlds themselves. It can be now called the makar for the world, the source for the world. What's going on? You guys are figuring it out?
I want to see the actual pasuk that we're darshaning, the whole thing.
Okay. Ubichdei sheyem makar la'olamos hu aydei tzimtzum. In order for the hispashtus of the light, this shem havaya, to actually do its real job and enliven worlds, as we said a second ago, it can't do it from its pre-tzimtzum state, right? All the light has to go to what's called the tzimtzum. And what is the tzimtzum essentially? Let's look at this for a second. So inside of Hashem's essence, as we mentioned it before, you have the ball of sun and you have the rays of light, but they're all sort of like hanging out there inside the essence. They're there. What is the tzimtzum? Inside of Hashem's essence, He removes those two levels of light, the essence of the light and the expression of the light, and He basically tucks them away to the point that they have no expression anymore. The essence and the expansion of the light inside of Himself, He basically sucks them back into the state that all that is now there is the essence. This is what we mentioned before. This, according to some, mistakenly, is basically an absence of God. But the way the Alter Rebbe describes it is this absence of light, and and all that is there now is the essence. Now what happens, right? Now that Hashem has gone through this process and removed all the light, He's going to bring back right after like a break of having a moment of cessation of any expression, he then brings back the light. But this time when he brings back the light, he only brings back the ray. He keeps the sun, the fiery sun, or what I was calling before the ocean of light, at bay. That part he does not kind of bring back after the tzimtzum. He only brings back the havaya, the little drop that it previously was a drop inside of an ocean, and the ocean itself was inside of an essence, right? He conceals the ocean and the drop. Now there's just essence. And now he brings back, all this is still basically taking place inside of his essence, but there's this notion that there's this other now, and he brings back just the drop. Now that this drop has undergone a, so to speak, removal from its source, which is both the essence of the light and all of that being swallowed up in the essence, and has this feeling of expression and a separate state of existence, it is now basically traumatized enough to become the source of the world. It has gone through a tremendous level of contraction where it can now enter into the experience of private, finite entities and, so to speak, breathe life into them and make them feel a separate existence. And in order to do that, it really was, it sounds like an act of creation, but if you think about it, it's actually an act of removal. In order for us to come to be, most people think about it as Hashem has to sort of make us something from nothing. The reality is he's actually peeling away layers that when those layers were there, our potential existence was blocked from expression. As he pulls away the layers, so suddenly it surfaces the existence that was there all along. I once sort of thought of one of the students, I think, brought an analogy about this. You know when you boil water in a kumkum, if you boil it all the way down to the bottom, suddenly you wind up with like limestone all over your kumkum. You never noticed that? Well, how do you get like rocks in your kumkum? I didn't put any rocks in there, right? The idea is that the rocks were in the water. The rocks were in the water, but when they were in the water, they were in a state of, they were water. They were not rocks. They were in a rock, they were water rocks, right? When you removed the water, suddenly the rocks appear. So it looks like you invented rocks, yesh mi'ayin. You didn't. All you did was you removed all the aspects that were covering over the rocks that were in your water. And this is essentially what happens with this, and that's why we say ata chaser hay. That the hay that's missing is basically what we're going to say is 5 levels of contraction, which remove layers of light which are standing in the way of the experience of self. And that's what it says, ata, when you remove the hay, guess what happens? Asisas hashamayim. You made the heavens, you made things. Because you removed the states and now these states that you removed, we're not talking about the essence of the light and all, we're talking about in the Shem Havaya itself. Just in that drop, we're removing 5 states from the drop. Because remember, the drop as it was, is all in its primordial state, is still way too high for any worlds to exist from it. Even though it's intended to be the light for the worlds, it's still too high to be the light for the worlds. And so in that drop itself, we're going to start going through the rigor of the tzimtzum. That's what the tzimtzum does. It removes level after level after level of overlying light on the drop, which enables the world to come to existence.
Could we extend the analogy maybe to say that, like, imagine like a sun and whatever, sun outside, and then you have like this dark house, and or like thing, and then there's this like pinhole kind of camera where you have like a hole poked in it where the sunlight comes through, and in the house is illuminated by this one tiny ray that's excluding the entire sun, which is way too powerful.
Right.
And then the whole reality is the whole world is just in that little whatever pinhole box thing with the one light coming through there that's creating everything.
Yeah.
And that's condensed or contracted from the whole.
Right, so if you think about that ray, before it went through the pinhole, it was still there. But it was useless because you couldn't make out that it was
destroyed everything.
Well, it was still inside of the greater light. So it didn't have its practical function of being able to be a ray of light, which now enlivens this whole other universe of whatever dust that's inside of your ray of light there. None of that could have come to being when the ray was still attached to the rest of the light. Right? So it's only when you remove all this other light that the ray becomes practical to actually make a finite world.
Like if you had a plant in there in that little room, right? Like
okay.
the plant outside, let's say this plant would get destroyed by the sun, it'd be too powerful. But inside, with one tiny ray of light, that's like enough for it to like grow.
Okay, yeah, I guess you could go with that. So I'm thinking more just, okay, yeah. The idea is essentially removing light creates a new existence.
Right.
Where we think normally that you're creating new existence by producing light, right? When you think of Yesh Ma'ayin, it's like there was nothing there, and now Hashem was going to put something there. The reality is the opposite. Everything was there, and because of that, you couldn't make out anything. And therefore, the act of creation is removing levels of this like disturbing light to make out that this ray itself can have an independent. There's no such thing as a ray when all the rays are happening at the same time, right? So the only way I can get the creation of this ray, which is actually sitting there all along, is to remove all the other rays.
If you like, we saw at Sinai, right? That the moment Hashem revealed, he peeled back the layers that he had put up blockages, right? And then he peeled them back, and then we all experienced more of his light, and we basically died because we couldn't take it, right?
That's like a lack of tzimtzum.
Right. So he unsimtzumed at Sinai, but then to show us what's really there.
Yeah.
And he had to re-simtzum so we could exist.
Exactly. Tov, we'll hold here. It was a deep one.